Coming to you from a cozy little condo high atop Old 4th Ward, Atlanta. Welcome to The Ron Show on America One Radio. Here's your host, Ron Roberts.
All right, happy hump day. Thanks for listening, whether it's on the America One Radio app, AmericaOneRadio.com, wherever you podcast, the on-demand tab at ProgressiveVoices.com. We thank you for listening. So yesterday, you may not have been aware, but inside the legislative chambers here in Atlanta, Georgia, Georgia Republicans took a perfectly well-meaning bill authored by House Representative Omari Crawford and turned it into a Franken bill. That's right, a Franken bill. Ross Williams at the Georgia Recorder reporting that a bill aimed at protecting the mental health of student athletes. Sounds nice enough, right? A meaningful, purposeful bill. Anyway, it became, according to reporter Ross Williams, a bill banning transgender students from bathrooms, requiring schools to notify parents every time their child checks out a book from the school library. It stops transgender kids from participating in girls' sports and bans sex education before 6th grade. All of this attached to a bill that Omari Crawford, House Representative Omari Crawford, presented yesterday in a state Senate committee. Ross Williams at the Georgia Recorder continues. As the number of days left in the 2024 legislative session decreases to a few days, lawmakers are tempted to graft legislation that has not yet passed one of the two chambers onto bills that have, giving their seemingly dead bills a new chance to reach the governor's desk. First, I'm going to give you audio of Representative Omari Dixon presenting his well-meaning legislation before Republicans chop it up.
The legislation that, again, 1104 in its original form that was passed, it seeks to address mental health risk for student athletes at the high school and middle school level. And what the bill essentially does is it obligates our athletic associations to consult with the Department of Behavioral Health to gather information on mental health and suicide prevention. We're going to ask our athletic associations to post that information so that it can be viewed by parents, student athletes, and coaches. That information will then be passed out to, again, coaches, athletes, and parents throughout the year. Again, this is information that will be coming from the Department of Behavioral Health. And then lastly, it's going to ask our coaches to review pre-approved suicide prevention and mental health literature and videos, and it's pre-approved through a National Federation of High School Sports. What this bill does is, again, it just simply aggregates all of the mental health information and makes it useful for our student athletes and their parents so that they can be better informed, and it equips our coaches with that same knowledge. And this bill is fully supported by the fully supported by Georgia High School Association, which is the largest athletic association in the state, and it mirrors what they are already doing, GHSA, with cardiac arrest awareness as well as concussion protocols. Those two issues, concussion protocols and cardiac awareness, they're very important, but I see those as reactive measures. This would be more of a proactive measure, and so that we can better support our student athletes. Again, that is the bill, the portion that I am familiar with. I cannot testify to any other part of the bill, but I'm open to answer any questions as it pertains to that portion.
Any further comments or questions on this portion of the bill? Thank you, Representative Crawford. I appreciate you bringing this piece of the legislation forward. I'll go through the rest of the bill.
Okay. And again, thank you for allowing me to present today. This is my first bill, so I appreciate you guys.
I thought that's what you were doing.
This is just a standard.
and I do appreciate it. Again, if I'm looking at, I cannot speak to any other section of this bill, and so because some of the language in this bill goes against what I was trying to do for Section 5, is it possible to only have a hearing only for this particular piece of legislation?
Oh, silly Mr. Crawford. No.
No, I believe we will probably take a vote today.
Okay.
Thank you, though.
All right. Thank you.
And I'll go, like I said earlier, I'll go through the rest of the bill. We added several pieces of legislation to this bill, several of which did pass through this committee earlier this session, starting in Section 1. And Representative Crawford, thank you for going through Section 5. I appreciate that.
Thank you.
So starting in Section 1, I would like to thank Greg Dolezal. This is his bill, the bill that he authored, Senator Dolezal. Senate Bill 365, which he sponsored. And you can refer to lines 37 through 90 in this bill. It did pass this committee in mid-February. And this language, it guarantees parents and guardians will have access to their child's school records and allows them to sign up for email notifications when a child accesses materials from a school library. And moving to Part 2 of the bill, this part of the bill is a portion of a bill, it's Bill 532, Senate Bill 532, and it's a bill that I sponsored. It passed through this committee in late February, and this has to do with sex education, that it would not be taught to students until after the 6th grade. It also requires the state board to update their material. There would be, I believe, a 45-day review process of that, and then when it comes and trickles down to the local boards for their adoption, there would be a 2-week period where parents could review and make comments as well at that point. And then moving on to Section 4, skipping around a bit. These are lines 426 through 444. This portion of the bill has to do with our state charter schools and their ability to utilize staff resources and personnel for education services providers to provide employment benefits to those teachers. As many of us on this panel, this board, we're strong proponents of school choice. This language will help ensure that the governing boards, the state charter schools retain the ability to hire and fire personnel who work at these schools and retain the overall operational responsibility for these schools. And again, I refer you to lines 426 to 444 in Section 4. And then backing up, finally would like to thank Senator Cardin Summers for Senate Bill 438, and this is Part 3 of the bill. And I'll refer you to lines 188 to 425. Senate Bill 438 takes a common sense approach to this issue of protecting the rights of women and girls sports to compete in sports on a level playing field. This bill provides public schools and private schools that participate in sport leagues with public schools to not permit boys to compete in these sports and that are designated for girls. And no matter the gender identity the boy may claim at that time for sporting events, the bill also it prohibits schools from allowing boys to use multiple occupant restrooms for changing areas designated for girls. The bill also creates a grievance process that allows parents and children whose rights have been violated under this code section to seek court order requiring compliance with these provisions. And they can also recover reasonable attorney fees. Each provision of this bill is strongly supported by our Lieutenant Governor Burt Jones, and I'm thankful for the opportunity to propose this legislation and these several pieces of different bills that many of which we've heard in this committee and passed out of this committee this session. While this bill has several parts, I think they each have a common thread: empowering parents to ensure that children are learning, competing in safe and supportive atmospheres, and also dealing with sports.
Yeah, but I mean, he takes a bill and puts all of these provisions that he knows are poisonous to Democrats who were ready to vote for the original portion, the original bill itself that Amari Crawford, who you heard in the clip say, I really just want to speak to the bill itself and not all of these additions that you're adding to it. He's not happy about this. Back to Ross Williams reporting in the Georgia Recorder. LGBTQ plus advocates called the bill and the legislative maneuvering contemptible. State senators earlier this month added language banning puberty-blocking drugs from being prescribed to transgender minors to a bill expanding the availability of overdose prevention drugs. This is disgraceful politics, hijacking one bill designed to address student-athlete mental health concerns and another designed to fight the opioid crisis and replacing them with attacks on Georgia's LGBTQ plus youth. That's Human Rights Campaign Georgia Director Bentley Hudgens. The original bills garnered overwhelming support in the House and held the promise of improving the lives of individuals in crisis. Instead, they have been transformed into legislation that jeopardizes the well-being of our LGBTQ plus youth. Georgia's lawmakers should focus on passing solutions that address real problems that our citizens face. More from Clint Dixon.
This bill also ensures that sex education be age appropriate in a manner that parents are fully aware of and in agreement to in public schools where their children will be taught. This bill also protects the mental health of student athletes and gives parents and coaches much needed tools to help their students succeed.
Oh, yeah, that. The bill itself, the original bill.
And perhaps, and most importantly, this bill protects the rights of women to compete against each other in women athletic competition that is fair to each and one of them. This bill enacts Title X more than 50 years ago, which was one of our country's greatest achievements, unlocking a range of possibilities for women in education and athletic competition.
By targeting transgender youth in the process, singling them out. If I had to guess, you could probably count on one hand the number of transgender female high school or middle school athletic participants in the state of Georgia. And yet here we are taking, again, a perfectly well-meaning bill and poisoning it with this anti-LGBTQIA plus rhetoric because they couldn't get these measures passed any other way. So again, they're hitching a ride with the poison aboard. So in the next few minutes and the rest of the show, you're going to hear some of the pushback inside this committee chamber from Democratic senators who are just gobsmacked that, again, this perfectly well-meaning, well-intentioned bill got completely graffitied with right-wing red meat. At the end of the show, we're also going to talk with a friend of the show, Georgia Equality Executive Director Jeff Graham, to get his and his organization's reaction to this legislative ugliness. Quite a show today. The Ron Show on the America One Radio app, AmericaOneRadio.com, and ProgressiveVoices.com. By the way, you can reach out to The Ron Show if you have comments or just wish to chime in, be a guest on the show, you've got something you'd like to advocate for. By the way, hit me up. 404-919-2725. The email, ron@ronshowatl.com. Senator Elena Parent, I like her a lot. When I hear her voice, I'm thinking Claire from Modern Family. And you know, Claire did try to run for city council. She didn't win, but Senator Elena Parent did. Anyway, quite the winner. Anyway, Senator Elena Parent goes in on the sex education part of this bill right away.
So looking at lines, it says 1114, the public school shall make the sex education curricula available to parents and guardians and the public for review online. And going down to, lines 129 through 138, it sets up a, before approval of any sex ed curricula, you have to publish it for 2 weeks, have several meetings, have written comments, oral comments, comments submitted through email for at least 45 days. I can't help but notice that the procedure that we're operating under down here seems to bear no resemblance to the type of procedure that this bill is insisting that school boards go through to conduct their business. I mean, this legislation isn't online. You pull up the bill, it still just has Senator Crawford's bill. This popped up in the last hour. Can you please explain why it's okay for us to operate in such a manner to attach 5 different bills and not let the public know and not vet them, but these school systems were requiring on a full page of code that they adhere to a completely different standard?
Love this.
Great question, Senator. I'd like to go back to some of my comments in the presentation. The bill you're referring to was vetted in this committee in its entirety and was voted out, and just didn't make it out of rules. It has been vetted. The public has seen it, along with several others of these measures. And simply what it's doing is it's empowering parents and protecting kids is what we're trying to do through transparency, in my opinion.
Thank you for that. The next question I wanted to ask you is related to, we did have some discussion last time we heard this bill. Although actually, one quick response to what you just said, we did not actually hear all of the bills that are being attached here. We did hear this particular one, so that would be my brief rejoinder to your response. We did talk about the exceptions that you put in, which are, or not you, but were put in the bill, which are good ones as it relates to lines 150 and 151 about allowing discussion of child abuse and assault awareness and prevention and menstruation. So my question, though, is how are the schools supposed to talk about menstruation without talking about human reproduction, which is forbidden before 6th grade?
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought that up. What I'd like to first do is give a shout out to my administrative assistant, Rachel Whitted here. She did catch that carve out, both of those carve outs dealing with child abuse and menstruation was not in the bill, which was added. Thank you for doing that. Which, allows teachers, as a girl goes through puberty, to be able to talk about those sensitive issues if they don't have that support structure at home. As far as, and I'm not a woman, but I did stay at a Holiday Inn Express once. So, but what I would say to the reproductive organ part of it or whatnot, I don't think that would align with sex education. So I think they. So
you think you could talk to a girl about menstruation without touching on any aspect of human reproduction? Is because that's what the bill said. How? Please let us know. How would you do that?
No, that's a great question. I've got 2 daughters. One is currently going through puberty, and my wife and I have been able to successfully, with her guidance and her leadership, my wife's leadership, have had those conversations with her without talking about reproduction.
So you talk about, you don't give any explanation for why the menstruation is happening. Because if you give any explanation for why it's happening, that involves human reproduction. And I can stop down this line. I'll just posit to you that I think that is a practical impossibility that's contained in the bill.
No, it's a great question. I appreciate you bringing that forward. My wife may have handled that part of it with my daughter as I handled that part with my son, but I think that's appropriate for parents to do that.
But you said, okay, I'll try one more time. You say here that you can talk about those things, because what if they aren't getting those? Those are sort of like critical things that people do need to know about it, and I believe in your wisdom you put in those exceptions for that very reason. And so then I'm just trying to, again, I'll be quiet, point out that you really can't talk about that, which you did decide was a public good, without running afoul of the rest of the bill. And I might have a couple more questions later, but I want to let my colleague ask a few. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Senator Halpern?
I'm actually going to hold right here because I'm up against a hard break. I've got to break in about 50 seconds or so. Senator Sonia Halpern. I hate to cliffhanger you like this because I hate cliffhangers. I hate when they do that. The good news is, if you're listening on America One Radio, you're only going to have to wait a few minutes, get a little headline break in here real quick. If you're listening at progressivevoices.com on the on-demand tab, just a few seconds here, okay? Just chill out. And if you're listening via podcast, again, just a few seconds here. Just chill out. You're going to love what Senator Sonia Halpern does here. masterclass in dressing down hardcore ideologues. Also joining us at the end of the show, Executive Director for Georgia Equality, Jeff Graham. He'll weigh in on these measures and the taking of a perfectly fine bill and ruining it before it heads for a final Senate vote.
Broadcasting 5 days a week to make common sense common again. This is The Ron Show on America One Radio.
The Atlanta Journal-Constitution's Maya Prabhu writes about yesterday's legislative maneuvering inside the Senate Education Subcommittee. Here's how she writes. The hijacking of legislation, sometimes called a Christmas tree bill, is typically done toward the end of a legislative session when lawmakers try to revive bills that didn't gain traction by placing them into a bill that has already passed one chamber. It also allows bills to skip the committee process of the other chamber. That's exactly what happened yesterday. A Senate panel amended 4 Republican-backed bills, such as banning transgender athletes from playing sports, using restrooms that align with their gender identity, and preventing sex education in schools before the 6th grade, into House Bill 1104, originally a bill first-time Democrats sponsored to provide mental health and suicide prevention resources to student athletes. That would be Omari Crawford from DeKalb County, who, bless his heart, he's a first-time legislator, and he's sitting here trying to do the right thing by student athletes, and yet Republicans drag these other measures onto his bill to attach it to it, which by the way, let's frame this as it is. He's trying to prevent suicides amongst student athletes or students, and Republicans are adding measures that only add to the ostracization on the whole societally for other students. So while Democrat Representative Omari Crawford is trying to prevent student suicides, Republicans add measures that only put a greater psychological burden on other students who may themselves take their own lives. So we've been listening to this subcommittee hearing yesterday, and again, I let you hear Omari Crawford in his presentation of a perfectly well-meaning bill. And then Senator Clint Dixon, who chairs this subcommittee, adds in all of the other toxicity, the anti-LGBTQ plus measures that passed out of the Senate subcommittee before but failed in rules. He lists them all and then says, by the way, Lieutenant Governor Burt Jones is for these. Well, of course he is, because he's Republican Lieutenant Governor Burt Jones. I want you to hear Senator Sonia Halpern when she gets the chance to weigh in.
I wanted to just first acknowledge that Representative Crawford's bill is now filled with a bunch of bills that have, as they've been vetted through this committee, been some of the more contentious kind of conversation that we've had over the course of this biennium. So many of the things that we've done in this committee really have been like easy things that everybody can agree to, but this particular bill now is filled, I think, with the content that has been the most difficult. And so I feel sorry for the gentleman, Representative Crawford, who's now, for his first bill, got it filled with stuff that's not going to be easy for everybody to get behind, as his bill was when it came through the House. Kind of on the same point that Senator Parent was just making, a little reminder here that 6th grade is kind of the trigger point on this, and there are a lot of certainly young girls, much younger than that, who, even in this carve-out for menstruation, are experiencing that. We can argue that schools should not start talking about these things till 6th grade, and I could argue back that that's already a little late. Not that you don't want to be age appropriate, but I'm not sure that this bill actually gives consideration to what's really happening in the real world in people's homes and with their bodies, because that is getting younger and younger due to lots of reasons. So that's on that one. You know, when we're talking about gender identity, or what we're now going to say is whatever sex, biological sex you were born at based on your reproductive biology and genetics. I mean, again, I think that we're codifying into law issues that are not pervasive issues in the state, especially as we talk about, competition in sports. So that's an issue, because as I recall, when we heard that bill way back, there was not really an example that was given to this being an issue in the state of Georgia. Many of the video that I recall was showing it in some other state, I don't remember where, North Carolina maybe, but not Georgia.
In regards to
The sports, the transgender sports and the the competition, and girls not being...
went to, I'll let you finish.
Go
Sorry.
ahead. So, I don't know. I guess no question, just a comment to say that I'm disappointed that, we're at this point. This is the time of the year where we're likely to run across, bills that didn't go anywhere for reasons prior that now, it's like we had another bill earlier that was a Christmas tree bill earlier today. This is now the Christmas tree bill of all kinds of things that are hard to get behind.
What a friendly way she put this. I mean, sorry, that was just something of a masterclass in being contemptuous by being angry. And yet, did you hear the tone? She was just as kind and docile as might be needed. Perhaps if you were, I don't know, a girl in 5th or 6th grade who suddenly has her first menstruation, and wouldn't you like to be spoken to by someone with that sort of temper, that sort of demeanor? By the way, let me just point out, friend of the show, Melita Easters, executive director of the Georgia Win List. That organization, a big fan of Senator Elena Parent and Sonia Halperin. Of course, they are Georgia Win List endorsed candidates. I just don't think you can see too many other examples where you've got a party with politicians who are trying to solve a problem. It's a simple bill. Omari Crawford from the House presented to the Senate Subcommittee on Education, wanting to address the mental health, suicide prevention of student athletes. That's it. That's the bill. To create this mechanism for a broad array of folks who would have an impact, whether it's school administrators, mental health advocates, the coaches themselves, parents getting to know what's going on in their child's life. Because if your kid is having a rough go at it at practice, or the coach comes down on him or her, or they get cut, or something else is going on that just weighs on their mental health, and someone needs to be made aware of it, you want that. But at the same time, you on the right, you've got this is the dichotomy. On the left, dealing with a problem. On the right, trying to derail the solution to the problem by adding measures to the bill that add to the woes of other students. Because why? You have one side of the aisle trying to solve a problem, and the other side, I don't actually think they're trying to derail the solving of that problem. They're just derailing the solving of that problem by adding measures that their contemporaries across the aisle can't get behind. All of a sudden now you've got a well-meaning bill that has broad bipartisan support, and you've ruined it. You've absolutely ruined it.
You know what? My response to it would be, the heart of this bill is to protect kids, number one.
Not all of them.
Protect girls' sports. I went to and then empower parents by informing them would be kind of the heart of this bill. I personally, of course, I know we differ in this, but I don't see how this is hard at all. Any of these measures are hard to get behind. I went to a conference and heard a college or a former college athlete swimmer, Riley Gaines, and coming from a young lady that experienced this in Atlanta at a swim meet was forced to compete, number one, against a biological male, was forced to change in the same changing station with a biological male, and in her words, had all the parts, and I believe she was still a teenager, was exposed to all that, which I think is highly inappropriate and grotesque. And I've got two daughters that I spoke to earlier, and if my daughters are ever exposed to that, I'll keep those comments to myself. But we've got to protect women. We've got to protect women's sports. We've come so far in the past 50 years, and to allow biological males, no matter what they're transitioning from, to compete and destroy these collegiate sports is appalling to me.
Yes, Riley Gaines. I'm going to read to you an excerpt from assignedmedia.org. Christina Konwerski, a transgender writer, says she spoke with Riley Gaines last April 23rd. Konwerski wrote a detailed Substack post about the controversy over Leah Thomas on April 3rd and says she followed that up with an interview with Gaines, but never wound up publishing the results. Konwerski still has the transcript of her interview, though, and says Gaines made it clear at the time that Thomas never did anything to make her or other swimmers feel uncomfortable. I never felt uncomfortable around Leah or because of Leah. I will say it was a shocking experience and definitely resulted in some jaws being dropped. But based on my own feelings and talking to multiple other swimmers from various teams, it wasn't because of Leah specifically. It was more so surprising that we actually got to the point where this was allowed so suddenly and not based on a lot of science at the time. That's absolutely not true. The NCAA and the International Olympic Committee actually does base a lot of this on science. Anyway, Gaines continues, the NCAA was very back and forth before the meet, but ultimately said Leah could compete and they would reevaluate the rules and regulations at a later time when they could spend more time studying the science behind it. Leah only had two other teammates there, so I did not see how they interacted much. I have had several of her teammates reach out to me and thank me for being willing and open to speaking out to the public about the topic, as this is something they have had to deal with every day. Not sure of the specifics of what they mean, but I can understand how the situation is overwhelming for everyone involved. Continuing, Gaines went on to say that there were no other available locker rooms for Thomas to use. I don't think Leah would specifically put herself in a position where she was trying to make others feel uncomfortable or disturbed. Granted, I don't know her very well personally. You notice how, by the way, Riley Gaines keeps referring to Leah as her? Nice. I just don't think she would purposely bring light to the already controversial situation. It was an all-women's meet, so there were only women's locker rooms even available for use. I think, quote, harassment doesn't refer to any intentional exposure, but it doesn't change the fact that it still can be a bit traumatizing, especially for victims of past sexual assault, which I know for a fact was the case for a few individuals at the meet. I'm not sure if the NCAA asked Leah or gave her the option of a separate changing room option. I cannot speak for what their locker room situation looks like on a daily basis at UPenn, meaning the University of Pennsylvania. Notice, by the way, that this is a collegiate story. Senator Elena Parent brings that back into the conversation, that they don't even have jurisdiction over that.
You were mentioning some collegiate sports, which I don't think is covered in here. Am I correct? Because they have like the International Olympic Committee and the NCAA have their own rules. So I'm correct, right? That collegiate sports is not a part of this.
That is correct. Yeah,
Okay.
Yeah, I misspoke on that part. But
no,
we're
that's
just
fine.
giving
Yeah,
an example that
okay.
actually really happened here in Atlanta, Georgia.
Oh, I'm familiar with the example. Yeah, just
and then
just,
going back, what was your other question?
You mean on the last piece
Yeah, you were asking
about the enforcement?
Oh,
Or-
yeah, and the enforcement. Like I said, you've got to carve out here where parents can, file a grievance. But, if a biological male is changing in a girl's restroom, I mean, it's going to be pretty clear if you've got that happening. I mean,
Right. So maybe photographs might need to be taken.
I would imagine the girls would
I'm
come out.
wondering how you.
I don't know if you have a daughter, but I mean, if my daughter comes screaming out of a bathroom that a boy's changing in the bathroom, then I think there would be a right for an investigation into that.
Honestly, what's so stupid about all this is that middle school and high school kids, college kids, they're way more involved than the likes of Clint Dixon on these issues. They handle this better on their own than I think those men give our kids credit for.
We got to protect girls. That's all we're trying to do here.
I mean, I am a girl who grew up in, so thank you. Thank you for that. I do have experience with all of the things we're discussing and find it interesting that the three women on the committee aren't viewing all this as favorably as the rest of you gentlemen.
I would just say, I mean, if there's a male changing in a little girl's bathroom, that's perversion to me. And if the girls come out screaming that and there's a grievance filed, I think it would be pretty easy to determine that.
So do we have men changing in little girls' bathrooms?
If this bill passes
Georgia?
and signed into law. I mean, I gave one example. Of course, I know it was a little bit older and a little bit at the college level, but this would prevent that. Would you want a male changing in a female's bathroom?
So I don't want to go too far down the
When you're talking about a minor?
collegiate road because that's not what we don't have jurisdiction over that.
Bingo.
And that particular case, I know did spark a lot of conversations, and I do believe the NCAA is evolving on all these issues, just the same way the International Olympic Committee is, and every school system, public and private, throughout many, many parts of the world.
And I would argue that's
So-
what this is doing here.
Evolving?
Evolving and protecting kids.
Right, and I don't. Some people have their way of doing it that can put kids at harm. I mean, surely you're aware of the case of the transgender child who just died in Oklahoma after being beaten up in the bathroom.
Fantastic point. They're not protecting all kids. That's the long and the short of it. Jeff Graham, Executive Director, Georgia Equality, joins us in just a few. Thank you for listening to The Ron Show on the America One Radio app, AmericaOneRadio.com, ProgressiveVoices.com, or wherever you podcast. We're in the home stretch of The Ron Show, and I appreciate you for listening. One last little piece of what Senator Elena Parent said, because I left it off right where I had to time-wise when she brought up the suicide of Next Benedict, the trans student in Oklahoma. Fantastic point, which is what I think the overarching theme of this show is about today.
I mean, so I would just say, there are different examples all of us could pull to about relative degrees of harm, and what you view as harm to one community may be very valid that that's harmful. There are corresponding harms caused to other groups of people that also need to be vetted and taken into consideration is all I'm saying. But
again, Senator Elena Parent doing the hero's work yesterday in the Senate subcommittee. Joining me is Executive Director, Georgia Equality, Jeff Graham. Jeff, your reaction to the taking of a well-intentioned bill to just put in a bunch of right-wing red meat, a lot of it targeted to anti-LGBTQIA plus causes.
Yeah, unfortunately, this is not unexpected, but it is. It's shameful that folks are using this issue of scaring the public around transgender youth, trying to solve a problem that does not exist, and taking, as you said, a really good bill that was to promote mental health, suicide prevention amongst young people, and turning that upside down. We have seen recent reports that in states where this sort of LGBTQ hate-filled legislation has passed, that we're now seeing an increase in hate crimes targeting specifically LGBTQ students. There's the tragic story of the non-binary student, Next Benedict, that died after being beat up in a school restroom. The stakes for our youth, for the LGBT community, couldn't be higher. And HB 1104, but we also are battling HB 1170 that would immediately strip parents and medical providers from the right to provide essential medical care to transgender youth throughout the state of Georgia. So unfortunately, this is what happens in an election year. This is what happens in the final days of the legislative session. I urge folks to please watch our social media channels, respond to our action alerts. We will be down at the Capitol the last 3 legislative days. That'll be Thursday, that'll be then Tuesday, March 26th, and sine die Thursday, March 28th. We'll be meeting on the 3rd floor in the South Wing. Look for the Georgia Equality staff. We really need, especially parents, to come down. Whether you are the parent of a transgender child or not, We need parents to talk about how it feels to know that your ability to make medical decisions, your ability to create a safe environment for your child is at risk with these last-minute political moves.
One of the reasons why I wanted to start doing this show is because I don't think a lot of people listen to or see the video. I mean, these are all live streamed on YouTube, by the way. The back and forth that happens inside these legislative subcommittees or even in the chambers, they don't see how the sausage is made, and it's not pretty. But like at the end of the day, most voters don't even know about these bills until they're already passed and then awaiting signature. I think it's important to spotlight what's happening inside these chambers to actually listen to reasoned dialogue versus let's just throw some again, a perfectly well-intentioned bill could totally be sabotaged. You're going to have Democrats who are not going to want to vote for this bill because of the add-ons now.
Yeah, well, and in fact, the good language in that bill no longer exists. It really has been turned on its head. Our hope is that the House does have a reputation. It's had this reputation for several years now of being the calmer, more reasoned of the two chambers here in Georgia. And so we have to focus on the Senate before these bills make it out of the Senate. The chances are slim, especially with 1104, this bathroom, sports, library, Franken-bill that has been created because the lieutenant governor is behind this one. He's already sent out a press release. I'm sure that this is him setting himself up for a contested Republican primary in a couple of years, running for governor. That's the politics behind that. Just like with House Bill 1170 around medical care, those issues had been defeated earlier this year, and then suddenly Senator Stan Watson down in Savannah has a far-right challenger in a Republican primary, and he reverses everything he said last year about doing a pause, having a compromise. All of that gets thrown out the window when it comes to medical care for trans kids. And so folks do need to understand that it is politics that's driving this. There is no evidence whatsoever here in Georgia or anywhere around the country that transgender students, especially transgender girls, are depriving cisgender girls of opportunities to compete in sports, posing dangers in restrooms or locker rooms. These are made-up issues aimed at scaring an electorate who is new, is just unfamiliar with transgender kids. And as so many of our parents have said, no one expects to be raising a transgender child until it happens to you. And then your job is to love and protect that child with all of your heart and all of your mind. And that's what these parents are doing. That's what we're doing as an organization.
Jeff Graham, Executive Director, Georgia Equality, georgiaequality.org for more information. And again, you guys are, let me make sure I got the date right, because I think the date you gave me just a few minutes ago counters what was in the email I got yesterday. You guys are asking activists to join at the Capitol tomorrow, Thursday, March 21st, to show opposition.
21st, yes.
Okay,
yes.
just want to make sure I had that right.
21st, yeah.
Starting at 10 a.m., third floor. All right, good deal. We'll have that information in the show notes at ronshowatl.com. Thanks for joining me this morning, Jeff. I appreciate you giving me a few minutes.
Thanks, Ron. Take care.
Back tomorrow, 9 to 10 a.m., replay 5 to 6 p.m. on the America One Radio app, AmericaOneRadio.com, on demand at ProgressiveVoices.com. Show notes are on ShowATL.com. Have a good one.